Hello, hello, folks. How is everybody doing? Welcome back to Joystick Jams. It's me, your boy, Timothy Adon, and Noelle. This one. There we go. Are you there, Noelle? Did you say stuff?
Here. Hello,
Okay.
hello. There we go. Making sure everything's all good this time.
Yeah. I didn't want you to be silent again. That would have been too much.
It's been funny,
Um
that's for sure.
so today um Adam is taking a little bit of a breather. Um, Noel and I today are going to be talking about game development teams and how audio interacts with the different departments.
Because there are a bunch. You kind of, from like personal experience, I went in starting school, like college, as a game designer major. And then I was like, oh, so this isn't all there is. There's like VFX artists and localization, and like there's just this ongoing list of different jobs at a studio. And all of them are actually really important. And as an audio person, you interact with way more than you think you would.
Yep,
Like
yep.
it's, you don't just interact with just one team. You're interacting with every part of the game team, pretty much.
And everybody's going to want your attention in some way, shape, or form.
And normally at the end, to give you a lot of stress, you're like, "Hey, by the way, hi." My cat's being a little lovey
Kitty,
today, so she likes to say hi all the time.
the real streamer in this show.
She likes to steal the show. As soon as I start talking on my computer, she says hi. So just be prepared. Okay, but yeah, so as like I said, as an audio person, you just gotta be ready to like have your lingo down and know exactly how you're interacting with each team. So I kind of made a cute little presentation here to go through some like the main roles and how you interact with them.
And I am
So
very excited to see this because this opening page is very pretty to look at.
hello, welcome to the stream. How's your day
Hello.
going?
Um, if you wind up having any questions, feel free to ask at any point.
Yes, yes. Okay, so like the first main one, of course, is like a game designer. They're the first kind of step in the game process. So they're like all the conceptual. Okay, Kitty, don't step on my thing now.
No, we're not done with the first slide.
See, like that first one too much. So they're pretty much the conceptualizer. They program all the puzzles. They kind of figure out how everything's going to work in a game. Kind of bring it like all of the designs into like a prototype to try to sell to like a studio, get funding and stuff like that. As an audio person, this is where a lot of your go-to information is going to come from, and where you can get started on first in a game, so you don't have to wait to the end when everyone's kind of shoving a bunch of stuff at you. Game designers kind of have like how the game's going to look, how things are going to interact with each other. You're going to bounce a lot of ideas off each other from the get-go, so it's not just rushed. Um, as a composer, I feel like this is also where you'd probably be introduced first to get some of your conceptual ideas as well.
Absolutely. I don't have any words to add to this one,
You're
unfortunately.
good. Okay, so next up, VFX artists. So this is like typical. VFX artists do all the really fun, pretty explosions and makes all the pretty stuff in the game. So like all your spells and stuff, this is gonna go to all start from them, and all of your audio, all of those little doodads and explosions and spell castings all have to have an audio element, or they're gonna feel like nothing.
Yep.
So they have a huge bulk of the job of just making the game polished, and then you have to work from as soon as they're done to make sure it's timing to their cute art. Like they have a really fun job. I'm really jealous of people that can do that kind of thing. But
and
yeah,
and I feel like a lot of who you're going to be working through, where like the game designer is probably giving you a lot of the concept, the visual effects, the VFX artists and artists in general will be giving you a bulk of the ideas, um, through concept art and mock-ups and things like that you're going to be working through, as well as making sure that, especially when we get to animators and things like that, getting the timing down correctly for your sounds as you make them.
for sure. Next up, animators. So
There he is.
next, these guys make everything actually triggerable. They're the ones making every foot or run and walk cycle. They do all the environment animations. It's all of it. So like that's where it kind of splits into like the different sections. Like so, technically, VFX artists could be under this like animation tree on like the left side. Um, but yeah, so you're gonna be working hand on every one of those triggerable animations that they make. There has to be an audio cue with it, and they're gonna give you a list. And once again, that's probably gonna be more at the end by the time they get it to you. But they should at least at the beginning, like be correlating with you as it goes, um, to make sure everything has its own little audio cue or has multiple. So like footsteps should never just have one footstep sound cue. It should have a trigger of 5 in a sequence and it goes through.
Yeah.
But you work a little bit more with the programmer on that part.
It's
Yeah.
important to note that depending on the size of the studio you're working with, a lot of these jobs will be either condensed into fewer positions or expanded into more. So just keep that in mind.
Very true. Indies are a lot different, but it's all the same roles, just one person's wearing a lot more hats than you would
Yeah.
expect in any other studio. Next up, we have localization. So this is one thing that kind of no one really realizes is a thing. So every game you have, especially if it's like bigger, like I say Destiny, they have it all like going in English the way it was made and intended, but then it has to get translated to different languages so it can be playable across the world. It's not just um not just in English ever when it comes to like a AAA studio title. And as an audio person, you have to be with them as soon as those translations are made, because then you have to go back and re-record all those VO lines in different languages, get all those queued up.
Yeah.
So this is like the more tedious type of work. So this is where you have to have like a bunch of ADR sheets. You got to work with actors, like you work with actors. Um, but so it's never just like the English line on a AAA studio. You're gonna go through and have to re-dub everything.
Yeah, and I don't
From
have experience with doing a lot of dialogue, but I imagine that that's another one that usually has a specialized audio person doing it too.
yes. Um, the way we would get it, because I worked at a studio and we would get localization like work, and the way they came to us was that all of it was already done and all the words were already in like this giant session, but I had to make like 60 tracks for each voice line, like each character in the new voice line, and then I had to just master all of them together so that way they weren't all different volumes between the different games or
Yep.
different languages. So I had a very last step in that process, but there were so many little things just to having the game localized as an audio person. And once again, that's hopefully not going to be too much of a problem if you're like in a AAA studio, because it should be a person dedicated to that work because of how much it is. But if it's an indie studio and they want to have a different language, they're like, oh, I want it to play in Spanish, you gotta learn how to pick up all those little gigs.
Yep.
Next up, narrative designers. So a narrative designer, they write the dialogue and stories and lore of the game. So once again, like the game designer, this is where you're gonna get a bunch of just like starting material to work off of. They're gonna also write the dialogue. So once again, more dialogue work as an audio person. So you're going to make ADR sheets, stuff like that. But it can help with like I said, also with just the creation part of it. Like, oh, I don't really know if this game's gonna have like this kind of like serious tone or this kind of like happy tone. Like that's where you're gonna get that from, is the narrative designer and how they're writing the dialogue for the game. Um, as a composition, once again, this is kind of where you're gonna get your vibes from.
Yep.
Hello, hello, don't step on the keyboard. Okay, thank you.
I saw that tail going along the screen.
She does it. Okay, she laid down. She's all good now. A producer. So every game team should have a producer. This is a very important role. They're the ones that keep everything on task and make sure everything is flowing the way it's flowing, and they're the ones that give you your deadlines. So that's pretty much how you're gonna like work with them. They're gonna tell you this needs to get done by this for this stage of the game, and you need to see to it. And they're gonna be the ones that also help you kind of co interact with everyone. Like, hey, animations at this point in time, can you go work with them and make sure you're like setting up with them and stuff like that. They have the most important and most stressful job. In my opinion, the stress of getting everyone on a team to stay in the same kind of like flow and make sure all the deadlines are being hit is beyond me.
Right.
Because like these teams, they're not like an indie team is a little less stressful, but still stressful. Because like you're making sure every gear has to work. Um, but yeah, so
Yeah,
as an audio
once you
person,
get to enough people, then you have to have someone dedicated to making sure everybody's doing their jobs, and that can be hard.
very. So yeah, just know that if you need to be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be working on, go to your producer. They know. They'll get you something to work on. In a team setting. Okay, quality assurance. This is like one of the last steps of the game before it gets released. This is to make sure that your audio is being triggered when it is being triggered. So they like a QA person would like write an email to you or come up to you and be like, "Hey, I noticed that this box broke and there was nothing there. Could you go back and take a look at it?" That kind of thing. They're your last step of defense. It should not have to get to them, but it is their job to make sure all of the queues are working at the end. So yeah, just always like when you think you're done, just go up to them like, hey, just want to make sure this thing that I had problem with, did it go through right? Um, yeah. So I'm kind of did not lay this out well because programmers, there we go. Programmers are the ones that are actually going to get you going. In an indie studio, that could fall onto you to have to program your own audio. It can be difficult. Um, to like have to teach yourself that kind of lingo, but it's very important that you kind of already get it. I would recommend honestly attempting it yourself before you ever start even applying to these kinds of jobs, to have some kind of gaming pipeline for yourself.
Yeah, this is actually one where I can actually talk about something. um, so it's if you've ever had a job where you did not know how to program and therefore did not know how to talk to a programmer, there can and will be situations where they program your audio incorrectly. And if you have the capacity to catch that ahead of time, cool, but it really helps to know how to talk about implementing the audio in the way that you want to implement it. And so even if you're not going to be the person doing the implementation, it's really helpful to have at least a little bit of that background knowledge so that you can uh, more better communicate with the people that are handling your work.
Absolutely. And then another thing is they're also, if it is two separate teams, they are going to be the ones that set up the code for you. So if it has like everything as a base is an if then statement, most likely. So like if player moves this way, this sound triggers. And that's how you have to talk pretty much to your programmer to try to get a situation to work.
Yeah.
So, but they're going to be the ones that trigger or come up with like the naming conventions of these triggers. So you're gonna be working with them just for that part too. Like it is the most meticulous part is getting the audio into the game functioning correctly. It is a task and a half. Um, but I do absolutely recommend you attempt to implement your own audio before you get to that kind of point. Is a
Yeah.
extremely useful skill to have. Probably the most useful skill to have if you want to
Even
get
just
into
at
the
an
gaming.
introductory level, like
Mm-hmm.
knowing a little bit about it gives you such a huge it increases your vocabulary a lot. It's very
Mm-hmm.
helpful.
100% recommend that. Okay, next. Ta-da. Video. So it doesn't end at the game. Every game team should be marketing and sharing their trailers of their game. That is another step in which the audio team will be involved. They'll, come up with the tracks, the cool composition that gets everyone really pumped to play the game, and the sound designers will be needed too to make sure all the explosions that are in the game are also showing up in the trailers. That's like this is like the fun part. It's like showcasing your work in the funnest way possible. And yeah, so you'll probably be
um,
working with a video team to do that.
and this usually has a much different process, or in my experience, it has a much different process because the music that goes into a trailer is not always the same as the music that goes into the game itself. And a lot of the time, as opposed to actual in-game music that has specific triggers, I'm playing with things that I shouldn't be playing with. Instead of music triggering off of in-game triggers, it's actually linear music written specifically for a curated trailer. And a lot of the time, that music doesn't even end up in the game, so it winds up being a little bit of a different beast.
But it's a fun one. I love working linearly. uh, Getting the experience to just be able to just be like, oh, so this is where I'm at this frame and this minute, and I only have 30 seconds left, is a lot less traumatizing than starting a fresh game and you're like, oh wow, I have to do literally everything from the ground up. So yeah, this is the easy part in my mind to work linearly. As a sound designer, as a composer, it's like writing a whole new track. So.
Yeah.
But as a sound designer, it's a lot more fun. Environment artists. So as an audio person, you should be thinking about the ambiances of every environment in that game. You're gonna reach out to them, be like, I want pictures. I want to know what it's looking like. I want to know if there's a weather change, a time change. All that's really important information to grab from the environment artists. You should be talking to them as early as you can. Game designers will be helping with that too, with like I said, designing how the game should flow. And they're gonna be the ones that give you the actual picture of what you're working with. So yeah. Concept artists. I love concept artists.
Concept
so this
art's
is where
dope.
it is so much fun to see a concept art to like main game. That's my favorite thing to look at. Like on LinkedIn, people will post like, "Oh, this is my concept art," but this is what we got on the final game. I'm like, "Ooh, cool progression." Yep. It's so exciting. Cool. It's also cool to see what isn't able. Let's like, so they have like this cool concept character, right? But then you look at the final and you're like, "Oh, they scrapped that." It's probably because it couldn't get it to function correctly. And it's cool to see like, oh, what a struggle might have been.
Yeah, yeah, and seeing the evolution from like beginning to end, and also just like seeing the different art styles, because like what makes it into the game is usually just a vastly different style, because concept art is done on all kinds of mediums in order to kind of before it makes it into the game itself.
Oh yeah, and then different people too.
Yeah.
So like the funnest thing is everyone has their own style, and then it all ends up becoming one type of style at the end of the game, and that's interesting in and of itself, just how much change it has to have to do that. The concept arts, they're gonna give you a starting base as well. You do not want to have to wait until the animations are done to like start coming up with like what a character should sound like, what their clothes might sound like. You should be able to at least be coming up with like their footstep sounds without having like a trigger for it. The speed and stuff might change, but that's easy to go back and fix than having to just rush it all out at the end. Um, Same thing with their clothing. Like you can go hunting for like, oh, if they're wearing like a lot of jewelry, you should have a lot of jingles around. You could like prepare. It's the best way to prepare to get going, or even start and be like, hey, this is what I have for like how they might walk. This is how thick I made them and stuff. And then the guy would be like, oh no, that's not really fitting with my character, like my concept here. How about this? It's a great way to like not be waiting till the last second to get working. That's about it. I rushed through a lot when I talk, but yeah. So those are like the really main teams that you're gonna be working with on a like constant basis. No one of those teams should fall through the cracks ever, and it's just really important to be able to communicate with everyone and learn kind of what they do, how they do it, and how you have to interact with them.
I have a question, actually.
Yes.
So frequently when I was on teams, now mind you, these were smaller teams, I would only wind up having one point of contact whenever I had questions or I needed to turn things in or anything like that. I had one point of contact, and it was usually the person that I personally knew, because a lot of my jobs were at companies where I got the job because I knew somebody. Mm-hmm. But what would you do when you feel like you would need to when you feel like you need to have a be able to communicate with the rest of the team? How would you go about getting the information that you need when you really only have one point of contact and say you're working remotely or something like that?
Always is rough in a remote session, and that's becoming the kind of reality of everything. So I would reach out first to the point of contact, be like, who are you contacting? I need to know who it is, and then from there I need to get as many people as I can, just so I can keep a stronger flow. You just have to like I would say be really specific as to why, because they might be like, well, you're working with me. You're like, yeah, I'm working with you, but my job would be a lot faster and a lot smoother if I had access to these kinds of files. Um, this is like delaying me a little bit, having to wait for 3 people to contact you back and then to contact me when I can just have direct communication. You
Yeah.
just explain that you need direct communication to speed up your process,
Yeah.
because they don't want their stuff to get delayed either. If you explain yourself well enough, they should be willing to at least give you at least a producer,
Yeah.
who has access to it all.
I have personal experience. I was working remotely. This was actually not a company that I knew anybody in person, but I was working for a company that out of India making a mobile game, and I only had one point of contact, and it was the person that hired me.
Mhm.
And I didn't talk to anybody else, and that was one of my first jobs. So it never occurred to me that I really should be in contact with other people on the team, especially when the job was done
Mm.
and I got to play the game and I realized, oh, there were some issues here that were either not communicated to me or that I simply did not know would be issues because I never got talked to by anybody except for the one person that hired me. They were also hard to get in touch of in the first place, but it talking about this now, it feels very important that especially early on to try to get in touch with other people on the team so that you can have multiple perspectives of your work and how it fits into the greater puzzle.
Definitely. And then even then, just sharing it with like your work with multiple people on the team is also helpful, just to get more ideas. Let's say you're stumped, like, hey, this is kind of what I'm at for the environment. Environment people, what do you think? So even just like that can be really helpful as to you as an audio person. Um, I composition would be weird in my mindset, because in a sense, I feel like you probably could pass at the end, but it would be so much more helpful just to get as many lines as possible.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing I would recommend, because I'm in an office setting now, like an actual just office job, lines. It's hard remote communicating to anyone and expecting like communication back. So my biggest thing is like, don't be afraid to double text. um, let's because like I was, and like I wouldn't get my deadline's done in time because they just refuse to respond to me, and it happens. Like you can't always expect it. It sucks when it doesn't happen, but don't be afraid to like call them out on it. Like, hey, I'm at this point and I have time I have to hit. Let's go.
I need to hear back, otherwise this won't get done.
So like don't do like 8 of those in one day, but let's say you give them a day or two, they should have responded. Hit them up again. And let's say you're talking to your point of communication, but at one point you did get a producer. Don't be afraid to CC someone else on the team. Be like, listen, this person isn't responding to me. This isn't on me. I need a response, because can anyone else help me?
Actually, yeah,
Make that the email.
CCs in an email, a very powerful tool for getting the information you need.
100%. It's I've had to use it in my office job. Like, hey,
Yep.
CC my boss. I'm not getting
Um,
this is due,
some
and then the boss emails, and it's a lot scarier.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like dropping a tactical nuke and it can feel a little rude, but if you have a deadline, it can be very important.
Yeah, it's about covering your own butt on
Yeah.
those types of things, because especially in the game world, deadlines are hard deadlines. You cannot mess around the game world unless you're a AAA studio and you're delaying for a year,
Yeah, right.
which isn't supposed to happen, but it does. Um, but no, deadlines are very hard in the game world, and it can't be your fault that you didn't mess on it, especially when it's not. So don't be afraid to cover yourself. It's important. But yeah, working remote is always going to have its challenges, but it's something we're all going to have to kind of get used to, sadly.
Yeah. I mean, I like
I
working.
prefer it.
It's like my entire experience is working remote. Um,
I
but
prefer it.
yeah, I really like working remote, but you really have to learn to communicate. You have to learn what proper communication is when you're working remotely. Um, Again,
and
learning how to properly use CCs in an email is really big in that case.
and that's also where like learning their lingo is going to be so important, because if you just talk in just audio lingo in an email, they'd be like, what what do you need?
Right.
I have no idea what it means, and you just have to be able to translate to what they're working on. Speak in their terms as many times as you can, and don't be afraid to also ask questions either in those emails. So like, hey, I didn't understand what that meant. Could you? This is what I'm trying to do. Just always ask for clarification. Don't
Yep.
assume, because I also waste your time.
Yeah, it's very dangerous to assume something. If you're even a little bit not sure, just ask the question.
Always ask.
I
This
feel
is
like
the kind of work you can't mess around.
we talked about that during the how to talk to clients
Yeah,
stream
for
as
sure.
well, but it's worth bringing up again.
No, for sure. Because this is, you're gonna end up working on something for an extra 20 minutes to like 4 hours worth of like work just for it to have been for naught.
Yep.
So ask the question. Um, I think that kind of wraps up for me.
Okay. Um,
Any
have
other
you
questions?
been in situations where you've wanted to be in touch with different teams um but had breakdowns in communication, whether it was because they felt like it wasn't their job to communicate with you or something similar?
I think that comes more from a pride thing. This is a really weird scenario I had working at a company.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say like someone above me who was hired before me but still is like in the same kind of position as I am was the one having the direct line of communication. And as a pride, they want to be the one doing all the work, because you know it looks better for them the more they get and stuff like that. But when things start falling through the cracks, it's like, oh, by the way, how come you weren't doing that? It's like, oh, I didn't know because no one she didn't tell me. I didn't have the line of communication. I wasn't allowed to talk to that person, which is fine, but it did hurt. There were times where I was just like, this sucks, and there's something I could do. I could go to my boss, but that happened. Um, that's kind of it doesn't that is a personal thing, I think.
Right, right,
That
right.
it should not be a thing that happens, but pride does exist, and if someone is kind of purposely trying to screw you over to look better for themselves, that happens. It
No,
happens. Be
I
aware of it.
totally get that. Um, yeah, that like there are definitely situations, and this is not an audio job, but there are definitely situations where there are micromanagers and things like that. It's like, you know what? I'll just take it over. It's fine. I'm gonna do it because
It's
I know
like,
what needs to be done.
yeah, but that's not what the point was. And yeah, that is, it's brutal, but that is, like I said, just a personal thing. It's not a you thing. It's not the other company thing. That was one person trying to just cause some trouble.
Yeah, yep.
You just gotta work around it as best you can. Constantly poke at them because it'll annoy them. They'll eventually be like, "Fine, here." I'm like, "Okay, cool, thanks. Bye."
Um, what if you don't know who's who? Like, if you get hired on, you only have one point of communication. Again, personal experience.
Hmm.
And you're not really introduced to anybody else, so you don't actually know what positions are on the team that that you're working for. You just know that there's some shady organization in the background that you hand audio to, like it's hidden in your jacket.
That's funny. I feel like that's probably the most case for, like, let's say just an audio job that appears and you're taking it on. That would kind of be how it works. I would just, once again, whoever the point of contact I do have, I would be like, hey, just kind of want to know how this flow of this company kind of is working, or how is this game kind of coming together? What are the teams? Could you kind of run me down people and anyone I need to talk to? And they should hopefully be able to give you that information.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think the biggest question to ask is, how is this game being made? What kind of Just ask what kind of sections there are, like who's wearing what hats. You
Yeah.
just ask that question as it is.
See if there's a game design doc. If there is one, try to get access to it. If you're
Yeah.
if you happen to be a third party contractor, then they might be a little stingy on that. But you know, see if there is one.
I forgot about that. That is a very important document if you can get your hands on. Absolutely.
That's usually the game designer is going to be the one. Or at least I'm assuming the game designer is going to be the one in charge of that.
For sure, they should be, and then the producer should have access to it.
Yep.
So if like the game designer's not given to you, you can ask the producer. Everyone should have it.
Yeah.
But like you said, as a third person, they might be like, I don't want you stealing this
I don't.
information and putting it in
You,
the public.
we've already had you sign an NDA, but we still don't trust you for some reason.
Yeah, that's another thing. Sign your NDAs.
Yeah. Sign your NDAs.
Because
Sign contracts.
You need to do that. All the time.
Protect yourself. Protect other people. It's important.
Yes, please. Also, don't get skimped on cash
Yeah.
in your contract. Side note. It's important. Yeah, no, game design docs have all of your information. From the get go, concepts, how things are gonna work, who's who should be in the document as well, what teams are what. Yeah. So get your hands on that as fast as possible, if possible.
Yeah,
I would make that step one.
Yeah, and if not possible, try to get footage of any kind, literally any kind that you can. Any information that you get is good. There was a contract I was in. I didn't have access to much of anything, and I was like, "Can you just like, I don't know, send me a short like 5-minute video of what's going on in this game so I know what it all looks like?"
For sure, as like a composer, I couldn't imagine just working to just like what they want it to be like.
That was actually a sound design job, but even then,
Jesus.
Even then, it's like I need to see what I'm working on. Like I can make sound effects, I can make footstep sounds, but what does this person look like? Like I might be making the wrong footstep sounds.
Oh no, that's for sure. Yeah, no, that's like going to like to the animator or the program. Can you just play through this section of the game for me, please? Can I see how it works? Can you send me every animation trigger, please? They should have videos of the animations as they're going.
Yeah.
That's kind of how they keep their own like list of things that are done. So they should have it for you, and you should ask for it because working to nothing sucks.
Yeah, it really sucks.
It slows you down tenfold.
Depending on the producer, certain teams and people within those teams might be very hesitant to do what they assume is work for another department. Hello. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please let us know.
As I've got totally lost right there.
Yeah. I did just like cut off mid-sentence. What was I saying? There are some producers that might make team members within certain departments like feel like doing anything that would be helpful, like doing work for another department. I can't remember where I was trying to go with this. I think it has to do with like the idea of trying to get videos, like again, the idea of being stingy with providing information. Like some people might not want to simply because they feel like they're too busy to provide the information, which fair. But also we need that information, otherwise we can't do our work.
Not well anyway.
We
could throw you some sounds, but what's the point?
ETYC.
I just say ET.
ET. Yeah, there we go. We are talking about how game audio folks interact with different parts of game development teams. So if you have any questions about that, absolutely feel free to let us know.
Okay. One thing to piggyback off what you just said, they might not want to send you the animations for fear of animations leaking, characters leaking, concept art leaking. Tell them to at least jump on a call with you. They can jump on a Zoom call where you can't record anything because you're not able to.
That's true.
And just play through it. Just let me see a run through of the game really fast. Let me see what I can see. Because they might just be like, no, my game, I don't want to get leaked,
game.
please. I just my baby. Like, okay, valid. Let me just look at it though. Let me see what I'm working with.
I need to see what is your character even wearing? We don't know. That's cool. Can I interrupt you by asking questions and stuff? Absolutely. Yeah. We're just kind of vibing off of each other's questions and information. But if you have something to ask, absolutely feel free.
Composer, where would you really want to start?
Where would I want
on
to
the
start?
team?
So
what's your ideal scenario?
Ideally, the persons that I want to be in touch with first, game designer, narrative designer, and then loosely the environmental artist. But the game designer and narrative designer, maybe even more so the narrative designer, is going to have more of an idea of the aesthetic of the game that you're working on. And when it comes to music, like, you need to get the aesthetic down stat. And if anything, that's probably, unless there's a huge dynamic shift in the game mid development, that's probably going to be the thing that's least likely to change. Mm-hmm. So, like, maybe they want to go with Middle Eastern style music. That you can get down pretty quickly, and the narrative, the person in charge of the narrative will most likely be able to give you the references you need for that. So that's where I would be starting. And then after that, whoever is in charge of the characterization, I would go to them next, so that I can come up with themes for the individual characters. ET says, did you know that you can ban Discord account on your server? Just fun fact that appeared in my... cool.
But no, I do that one. But that happens too. I guess another quick question. Would you prefer to, like, as a composer, because, like, I feel like music is so much more complicated than, like, some sound design triggers, would you rather implement your compositions yourself, or have to have that conversation with the game audio programmer to make it work the way you intended?
So this is that I feel like the answer to that question boils down to personal opinion. And that aforementioned project that I worked on, where the audio was implemented somewhat incorrectly, had to do with the music being implemented incorrectly. So nowadays, I would like to be the one in charge of implementing it myself, so that I can make sure that things are looping correctly. The problem that happened with that mobile game was the music was not looped correctly. So I gave them the music, but they didn't, and I didn't know to ask, because it was one of my earlier contracts. They didn't specify how they wanted the audio, and they were like, we want this looping, and I'm like, cool. I wasn't sure how they were going to implement it. They just told me they wanted it looping, and I provided them the audio. They didn't account for the tail, the reverb tail, and I didn't account for that as well, because I didn't ask. And that's going back around to make sure you ask the questions, to make sure that you know how it is that you're supposed to be doing your work. There wound up not only being, like, when they looped it in the game, they not only included the tail so it looped incorrectly, but there was also a click in the loop.
Not the dreaded click.
So, like, when the game was already released, and I played it because it was one of my first released games. I wanted to play it. And I heard that click, I was like, oh no.
Why didn't you check with me?
Why didn't you check with me on this? So now, if they will allow me, and this doesn't happen most of the time, but if I am allowed, I want to be the one implementing it. because it means that I can have control over the loops, I can have control over the fades. It means that I can make the music sound the way that it's supposed to sound. No shade on programmers and stuff, but unless I'm there standing over their shoulder, they don't necessarily know how it should sound in game.
It's very hard to like to get across in word your intention.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
What about you? Where do you like to start when it comes to sound? When it comes to sound design, like who do you go to first?
Definitely the game design doc first. Honestly, is kind of where if I get that, that's great. I just read that and I don't have to make another conversation because I'm also very socially awkward at conversating.
That's true. Yeah, fair point.
But to be professional, I would 100% just walk through as many teams as I can. I don't like stopping at the one. I'm like, hey, so, but honestly, VFX artists and animation are gonna take forever to get started, anyways. Oh, you should go straight to your concept artists. You should go straight to the game designers. Like, so what are you trying to make? What can you get me first off? Can I get a list of possible assets you're thinking of needing? And then as animations are being made, can I please get those?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's kind of how I would start that conversation.
I feel like anybody in charge of visual design or aesthetic is probably going to be a really good place to start for music and sound design. I feel like, because otherwise, like, I don't know, it just I keep on getting in my head like game designer trying to make some kind of really cool real world AAA game, but doesn't communicate that, and you start just making random Mario bleep bloops.
Like, are we talking realism? We talking 2D platformer? What do we do? Cartoony, 8-bit? Like, it's just all those things need to be discussed with the game designer probably first. They're gonna have the majority of that information for you ready to go from the get go.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm out.
You're out.
I'm out. I'm out of questions.
Let's see. What do I have? What kind of teams have I worked on before? I mean, as I mentioned before, a lot of teams that I've worked on have been remote. There was that one team in India, and then there was one team that I worked on that's actually like, or was here local to me, who I was hired through somebody that I knew. But in both of those cases, I had one point of contact, and I wasn't really in touch with anybody else, with the exception of when it came to disperse payment, in which case they had me in touch with the person that was in charge for that. Which actually, that's also very important. Make sure that you're in touch with that department.
Sure, for sure.
The only other team, like full-on team that I was in was a college-based team, and we were making an educational game, and that was the only team where I actually went in, with the exception of game jams. The only team that I actually went in and occasionally worked in person, but that was my first contract. And so I actually didn't I wanted to work in person, but it was a 2-hour drive. They were in Boston. So I did it sparingly. And every time I went in, do you use FL Studio?
No.
No.
I'm a composer. Yeah. I would never touch FL Studio, ever. I'm a Nuendo girly now. I used to be a Pro Tools girly. Nuendo is Pro Tools, just a little bit sleeker for me, faster for me at this point. Pro Tools just makes me lag a little bit. I want to work fast.
Yeah, and I use Reaper. I did use Cakewalk, but Reaper is just kind of good all around.
I need to learn Reaper. I think that it's free, right?
It's free for 60 days. And if you just, pop your email in again, you could also get it free for another 60 days. It's really weird like that, but it's insanely cheap. I will literally buy it for you.
I do remember it like being the most affordable and the most like huge and important to have if you were on a budget.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I highly recommend.
I need to get it. I need to learn more DAWs.
I honestly, I should learn more DAWs as well. Once I got Reaper, I kind of stopped looking.
That was me with the Nuendo. I was like, oh, I kind of like this. But Nuendo was expensive and a
Right.
power. It's a powerhouse, and it's not necessary if you're not keeping up with it as much as I would like to. Um, but it's my tool.
Yeah,
What
and
I'm using.
Reaper is my tool. Like they all more or less do the same thing.
Yes.
I feel honestly, I feel like FL Studio has more specialized tools than the rest of the DAWs do.
As like new Windows, well, Pro Tools had a lot of like bass plugins too that were really nice. Like their EQs were they were all built in really good. I like new Windows like built-in reverbs. Love those.
Mhm.
I don't think I've ever bought another reverb plugin after just using the Windows based ones.
I feel like that's my biggest complaint with Reaper is that, and probably why it's so cheap, is that it doesn't have built-in effects that I like. I use the EQ that comes built in with Reaper, but other than that, and I use the pitch shift a lot. I use the pitch shift, but I don't like the reverb. I don't like most of the other special effects. I have a lot of VSTs that I plug into it instead.
That makes a lot of sense. I honestly have no VSTs. I
No
have very few.
VSTs.
I have so few. I that's something I just need to like find more things to help me like
Man, I would
make my life easier.
at least recommend getting yourself Valhalla Supermassive. It's a free one. So,
Oh, oh, I do
it's
have
free.
that one. I have that
Okay.
one.
Oh,
It's
that's right.
free.
I think you talked about that. Yeah. Valhalla Supermassive is fantastic. It's a really
If
good
I see
reverb.
things free, it's for me. I take three. That's my dad's motto.
I
Like,
I like periodically looking at articles that are uh free plugins of 2024. Like here's the top 12 free VSTs of 2024, and I like browsing through those, and occasionally I'll be like, "Ooh, that one looks nice," and I'll take that one.
you find really interesting things on those.
Yeah, yeah.
There was this one that had like a reverser that was really cool. Like it was like a monster effect, but it was called something so wacky. And I wish I could find it. It was so stupid. But and like even like in the trailer videos, because normally some of those plugins like come and like, here's what it could do. You couldn't tell what it was doing. It was just like a
Right.
cacophony of sound, and I loved it.
I once made a game using Pygame library. It was a disaster. Games are too hard to code. It really just takes a lot of practice. Um, and that's really all it is. Like it takes practice, much like, and it's unfortunate because you would like to do the fun part immediately, um, but it's you just
Oh,
gotta.
I see what this is.
What's up?
I was looking at what Pagan is. It's cool. So it's like a beginning learning how to get things going. Um there is something else that's kind of similar called RPG Maker that I messed
Yep.
around with. Uh but yeah, no. Tim yeah.
Did you forget my name?
No, I said Tim. I just my brain like stuttered.
Yeah,
Tim
it takes a lot of
is right.
practice. Um, and really the best way to get started is, or at least, and this your mileage is going to vary because it really depends on how you like to learn. Um, the best way to for me to get started was to follow one tutorial from beginning to end, and then to just start playing around yourself. Um, Google is your friend. Google has been my friend when making games. Like I'd start off with a template that already existed and be like, I want to make a gun, and then I'd Google how do I make a gun do the thing in the engine that I'm using. I did that a lot in Unreal. You guys code as well or just music? Um, I mean, I do music. Noelle does sound design.
But part of like audio is occasionally has to like at least work with coding and or implementing the audio itself. So we use programs like Wise, which is
Yeah,
kind of like programming,
yeah.
but for our little music and sound bites. It's fun, but hard.
So yeah. So while I know more or less how to code, I don't like it. I do not enjoy it. Um, I learn how to do it because it makes it easier for me to communicate with people that do know how to do it.
Absolutely. My knowledge ended at coding from HTML. I took one HTML class in college, and I found out, oh, this is hard, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And so I just was able to do a lot of basics from that. It's like this is how things work in computer language. Uh, this is how you can help
Yeah.
yourself later.
I became a huge fan of any game engine that has visual scripting. Which is primarily Unreal. Unreal has like
Hmm.
the best visual scripting code language that I've seen thus far, and it worked better with my brain because it's a little bit more like doing a puzzle uh, than than typing out code. It's still a lot of the same concepts as coding, and it still is coding. It's just it's easier for me to see because I my brain stops working when I look at big blocks of text.
Sure. That's very 100% valid. One thing I also recommend, YouTube Academy. YouTube is full of just knowledge and stuff on like how to basics of coding.
Yep.
It helped me a lot with my audio implementing. Uh, People have done it. There's
Yeah.
not much new anymore in terms
Yeah.
of like I can't get this to do the thing I need it to do. Someone has done it.
Yep.
Um, and then also don't be afraid to ask like your friends who might know how to code. They might also be willing to share with you, walk you through those little things that you just still can't get, like those little nuances. Um, I went to college, so I spent a lot of time with teachers like that because my brain, I don't learn from videos. I learn from doing, but if it doesn't work, then I get frustrated, and then I need that coach, in a sense, like, oh, so this is exactly where you messed up, because then I get lost. Kind of how my brain has always worked. So
Yeah.
having a friend is recommended.
And
Just
like
someone you can reach out to.
we can implement audio. Like me, actually, can you implement audio, Noel? You know how to do that, right?
Basically,
Okay.
very basically, but yes.
All the three of us. There's only two of us here right now. The three of us all know how to implement audio, which is close enough to coding, and we can answer questions on that very readily. We can, Adam and I can answer some questions in regards to coding. If it's related to audio, then we might be able to answer it.
For sure. Uh, Try to see if I missed any team member today. Making sure I hit everyone. It's kind of funny. The list I started off on has community manager, so like the social media team.
Oh, that's
I
right.
lumped it in with video and marketing in my mind.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, community manager. Yeah, I suppose there are some instances where you would be um interacting very specifically with the community manager, but it would be if the team that you're on very heavily focuses on I'm going to okay, you
You're
did
good.
it.
Very fast.
You got there first. Uh where was I? I feel like you would be more focused on that if you were working on a game that is focused more heavily on audio, um, i.e., supermassive games, like Transistor, Bastion, Hades, those games. I feel like the audio person there, um, the what is his name? Is that Danny Baranowski? No, I don't remember. Um, is very tied into the PR stuff because the audio is a lot of the point of the games that they make.
That makes a lot of sense. One thing it says also like live streaming, I guess, for like the company. You know, it might also be helping. They might be like, "Hey, audio,
Mm-hmm,
my mic
mm-hmm.
isn't working. My mic isn't working.
That's true.
Why is no audio going through?" And you're like, "Oh, because you didn't route it right. Learn your routing."
Yep. Learn your
Why
routing.
does microphone not connect to Discord? Go from the wire down. Like, does the wire work somewhere else? Okay, it's not the wire. Yeah, fun stuff. You're
um,
always asked the little questions.
you're always asked for the little things, and of course, don't ask us about routing audio for Twitch. It doesn't work. The fact that you're hearing us at all is a miracle.
Uh, I keep everything so simple on my streams. I have my desktop audio and I have my Focusrite going through
Okay.
as my audio input.
Okay,
I
so
don't
let
mess
me
with anything
rephrase.
else.
Don't ask us how to stream DAWs. We're still figuring it
Oh yeah, no.
out.
That's a pain and a half no
It's
matter
a
what.
huge pain in the ass. What companies you worked for? Um, I worked for Jungly Games and Hit Point Studios and then a bunch of like independent people that are so independent they don't have company names.
Valid. I've worked for just it was like a post-production house in Chicago. They worked mostly on films, so I'm very film trained, and I've had a few games in that house I got to work on. I'm currently working with a place with like a little indie studio thing called Bitrate Games, and that's what I'm working on currently.
Sweet. That's dope.
I'm
And I
excited.
currently make occasionally make audio and games for an organization called Tiny Mass Games. It's not so much a singular game company, but it's a group of us here in Massachusetts that just make small games.
I love that.
Yeah. Um, so it's been an hour. Do we have anything else that we want to discuss before we go ahead and end it?
I think we are good. I think we recapped a lot. We talked a lot about learning how to interact with everyone. Being willing to learn the lingo of not just the audio team. You have to learn everyone else's lingo, what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. So if you go up and you ask um an animator why the VFX aren't done, they're gonna be really annoyed with you when there's a VFX team. So just know who you're talking to. It's important.
Yeah, Et. We stream for about an hour to do our discussions and tutorials and stuff, and then we post the VOD on YouTube sometime later. I'm actually uploading a VOD later tonight. Um, and then we stream every 2 weeks talking about a different subject.
Come catch us every other Sunday.
Yeah,
We'll
every
be
other
back.
Sunday except for today, where we're streaming on a
Yeah.
Monday because that's just how the
We're
scheduling
playing
worked
catch up.
out.
Things happen in real life, and we're all
Yep.
very busy people.
Yeah, we're
But
all very busy.
it should be every other Sunday. You should come catch us.
So yeah, feel free to leave us a follow if you want to hang out some more and ask us more questions.
We will be around.
We will be around. And also, you can also catch us on YouTube on our YouTube channel, which is also named Joystick Jams. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns or ideas for future content, please feel free to email us at joystickjams@gmail.com. Or you can leave a comment on our YouTube channel. And I think that's it currently.
I think you hit it.
All right. We will talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye.